Hello, Simone. I saw a video recently that I want to play a little clip from that argues that the left, and this is a leftist arguing this, has essentially lost the battle for the internet. And the
What?
statistics she provides are compelling. So I play the video clip.
There is no alt-left pipeline, because for the longest time, the internet was the alt-left pipeline. Maybe it doesn't feel like it anymore, but for over a decade, it felt like the internet belonged to us, the progressives, the feminists, the socialists, the Bernie bros, the techno-revolutionaries, the Wikipedia editors, and not just Tumblr, the internet. And then, first slowly by the co-opting of beloved online mascots like Pepe and Doge and Joe Rogan, and then, all at once, in the last year or so, the right took over the internet. In the 2010s, the culture war was ours to lose, and we lost. We buffed that, man. Having blue hair and an ambiguous sexual orientation, that used to be cool. Know them.
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. It'll happen to you.
Anyway, the left wing of American politics is the Democrats. I'm sorry to tell you. They are pouring money into throwing cringe yet lavish coconut-themed parties for online influencers. And plot twist, I was one of those influencers. And everybody is rightfully dunking on it online. Meanwhile, the Republicans seem to have an unstoppable wave of organic support from basically every podcaster who doesn't talk like with the NPR voice. Today on our show, we're going to be discussing the ways in which, like that. So I ask, what the happened? Now you might be saying, Hazel, you're catastrophizing, okay? The internet is still very left, or at least a liberal place. And to that I say, that's right, look at it.
Look at it! Look at it! I want all of you to look at it!
Almost all the most popular channels on YouTube, not to mention all the other ones, including Rumble? Should I be posting my on Rumble? Yeah, so they're all right-leaning. This Media Matters report shows that 9 out of the top 10 online shows had right-leaning politics, and across the internet, the right-wingers took the lion's share of the views. This is a big deal. This has real-world effects, obviously, because now they're calling the 2024 election the podcast election, and Trump is also doing this. He specifically thanked podcasters in his inauguration speech.
Now, you hadn't seen these statistics before. What are your thoughts?
This is so surprising to me because, as you know, I mostly consume leftist media on YouTube. And so my perception is that YouTube is just a socialist, Marxist, super left-leaning echo chamber, and that we are among the very few that post content that's conservative, aside from like some, conservative niches. But the mainstream stuff is super
And
progressive.
it used to be that way.
Okay, so what happened is she saying this happened after Trump was elected?
She's
By the way,
saying-
I was just watching a left-leaning video in which this one she's supposed to be financially focused, but she's just incredibly politically polarized, interviewed, among other people, Princess Weeks, a very progressive YouTuber. And she literally bleeped out President Trump's name. Like it was a bad word. Yes. Like this is how, because it's too triggering. Anyway, like this is how I'm just so surprised by this, right? Like in light of what I'm listening to.
It actually makes sense if you think about it. If I think of any YouTuber or online personality who rose to fame, let's say from 1990 to 2010, my assumption is going to be that they are left-wing.
Because you could not have gained all that political, all those followers without being banned if you weren't progressive.
Well, that's part of it, yes, which is why because they had a lot more editorial control back then.
Yeah.
But they were just all progressive. No, but what I mean is if you were like a neutral content creator, right? Like if you were Matt Pat or you were, Shoe on Head, or you were, you're creating content that is like maybe sometimes it touches on the political, the Green Brothers or something, or you were, the show that became Real Politique. What did he do? The bald guy who I like. Vsauce, all of these individuals, you assumed, even if they don't talk about their politics, are far lefties.
The Green Brothers, aka the Vlog Brothers, are super leftists.
Yeah. Or, who is that lady who did like the song, Do You Want to Date My Avatar? He's actually pretty
Oh.
cool. Anyway, she's far leftist as well and everything. But now I
And Jenny
often take,
Nicholson, leftist.
yeah. Now I often take the opposite approach. I generally think anybody who's risen to fame within the past 10 years, if they only talk about their politics casually or not explicitly, they're typically rightists.
So they were just closeted rightists when being a rightist would have otherwise gotten them banned?
No, it's a new class of creators. It's new people who were not famous before.
So they just got famous now, like after the
The
second
people
Trump
who got
election.
famous in the past 10 years, largely speaking, like Asmongold. Asmongold was not famous before 10 years ago. Like he may have had some.
So you're saying
lingering
this rise first started, and they were first able to accumulate momentum with the first Trump election.
Nuxanor. No, I don't think it was the first Trump election. I'm going to argue why I don't think it was the first Trump election actually,
Okay.
because let's talk about like what I think caused this, because I've been trying to like actually dig my brain on this. And I think part of it is the way that each side relates to positions of power. If I look at the online lefty YouTubers, none of them, and I mean literally not one that is popular that I am aware of, identifies as a Democrat. In fact, they are quite antagonistic to the Democrats and see them as not real leftists. Like Hassan Piker is never going to say I'm a Democrat. No, and I mean this. Not only will he not say he's a Democrat, he let on his show, AOC and Bernie, like two of the most leftist Democrats, and he was roasted for it by his fan base. And so part of the question is the right like that? It used to be. And when I think about right-wing influencers, because for a while we've been trying to like build a coalition of them that we can invite to stuff. And it used to be normal when I reach out to them and I'd be like, look, I'm trying to build like a Republican coalition of influencers. And they'd say, well, I'm not a Republican. And I'd be like, everything you post is pro. What are you talking about? And I realize that what you used to have was Republicans, and you had this on the left as well, is fear a few things. One is that there's easy social status to be gained in just shooting down everything, being like, oh, that's not cool, because clearly the implication is that I am cool, I'm unique,
right, I'm better than
snowflake.
this. Yeah, well, because it's very, I mean, any large political party is going to have its faults, so it's much easier to be perfect by being like, well, I have nothing to do with them.
And then you would see post-election cycles, the left was like this, right? Like they'd say, well, obviously, I might, even if I might support the Democratic Party, obviously I hate Hillary Clinton. Obviously I hate, they'd always say they hate whoever was like the de facto leader of the party.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually saw this with Republicans during Trump's first election cycle to an extent, where people would be like, well, I'm a Republican, but I'm not like a Trumpist Republican.
Right. Yeah, that did happen a lot.
And that's changed dramatically. Now, it's not to say we don't have Republicans who have turned against Trump. You can see our episode, why did the racists and anti-Semites turn against Trump? Nick Fuentes, Leather Apron Club, David Duke, Richard Spencer, all of them very aggressively tried to get their followers to not vote for Trump. It's not like they were tokenly against Trump. They were aggressively wanting Trump to lose and Kamala to win, to basically treat the light a lesson for not caring about their little snowflake opinions enough. And they showed a few things. One, that we don't need people like them to win elections, and there is no point in catering to people like them. But then two, which I thought was very interesting, is when they turned against Trump at the same time, many, many more mainstream Republicans, even people who may not fit a stereotypical Republican mold, became very pro-Trump. Like, for example, Asmongold. In his political positions, Asmongold is left of center. In everything I've ever seen about him, Asmongold is left of center. Mm-hmm. And yet he is, without hesitation and unironically, willing to say, I support Trump. Creators like Leaflet, who we've had on the show, I love her. She is very centrist in her actual opinions, maybe left of center. Yet she will unapologetically support the Trump administration. You will see individuals like, you just sort of, you can consider us, right? Like we unapologetically. I historically, if you'd asked me a few cycles ago, I would have said, well, I agree with a lot of the things the right does, and I vote for them sometimes on the ticket, but I don't, agree with Trump. And the question is why did that change? Because I think this is a big part of why the right's been able to win, is that you're able to have fun within rightist circles and like unironically support things.
Mhm.
And it's not just about shooting down everyone else. But then the other thing that I've noticed is we have our episode where we talk about the diversity of thought within each political faction. And you can see there's very little, on this graph I'm putting on screen here, very little diversity of thought within modern leftist culture and a very wide degree of thought within modern rightist culture, which provides a secondary benefit, which means there's a lot to talk about. Like, why would somebody watch 2 hours of a right-wing podcast? Because you don't know what's going to be said. Like, I don't even understand when people are like, I want a 2-hour left-wing podcast like Joe Rogan. It's like, but you know all of their opinions. Like, why are you watching it?
That's an interesting point. Yeah. But
And
although,
this-
I mean, I will argue that I don't consume a lot of right-leaning content because I do feel like a lot of it's this curmudgeonly repetition.
No, I
of
mean, you do get
ideas.
curmudgeon right-wing content. Like recently, we've ragged a few times on Sargon of Akkad or Carl Benjamin, and I like him as a content creator, but he very much takes like the curmudgeon approach. And you know, and that's one of the reasons, like, I don't understand how we have the highest overlap with his channels. Because while I like his channels, I always know exactly what his opinion is going to be on everything.
Yeah.
And I never hear an argument I wouldn't have predicted from him. And so I'm often like, why did I just spend an hour watching that? Like, that wasn't anything that I didn't expect. And I wonder.
I feel the same way when watching Brett Cooper's content.
I do feel the same way about Brett Cooper's content, which is why I don't understand why she's so popular. I'll say this. I like her, like, as a person. She seems interesting, but I know exactly the main reason to watch Brett Cooper's content is when she's talking about celebrity gossip, because she's got great celebrity gossip. But no, she does. And you know she's going to be honest and based about it, right? But when it's politics stuff, it's like, okay, this is like the mainstream.
So it's almost like choosing the skin through which you want to consume certain contemporary concepts or like news concepts.
That's a very interesting way to put it, right? The skin, yeah. Well, but that's what makes the conservatives different from the leftists, right? If you go to conservative content creators, yes, you have the skinwalkers who it's just, am I watching this in a Brett Cooper skin or am I watching this in a Sargon of Akkad skin, right?
Right.
And I will note that I actually do not think Brett Cooper is as pearl clutchy as Sargon of Akkad. She doesn't do that.
No,
quite
she's
as
not.
well.
No. She comes across, well, she doesn't come across as curmudgeonly, and her default isn't to just poo-poo something. She will stand up for things or express support for things, even if she doesn't have a universal feeling of safety that they're going to turn out perfectly.
Yeah, but there's that style of content creator, and the left has a lot of those. But then on the right, you know, you've got your like Curtis Yarvin or people like us, or, you know, content creators that you can go to and you're like, okay, what is actually their take going to be on this? Like, I know if I read a Curtis Yarvin piece, or a Munch's Molebug is what he's often called, I'm going to come across at least some ideas I have never personally thought before. And that's going to be stimulating for me. I don't really have any leftists like that. Even when leftists break the mold, and people can be like, well, Scott Alexander's a leftist. And it's like, and this actually, I think shows the problem, right? The very fact that the New York Times tried to do a hit piece on Scott Alexander, and many mainstream people on the left right now consider Scott Alexander a rightist, shows why the right has grown so much.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Scott Alexander is not a rightist in literally any belief that I'm aware of, other than that, well, you know, we should challenge the system at times and think outside of cultural.
Well, he doesn't
norms.
support Trump at all, so there's that.
Right, but he never claimed to. That's why I got really mad at the New York Times piece that like put him in the same category as like Richard Hanania, and it was like, look at all these rightists who have turned on Trump. You have like Richard Hanania, and then what's her face, the one who we've had on the show from like Eastern Europe.
Oh yes. Oh. How can I blink on her name? But yeah, she's so cool. Who lives in Romania.
Anyway, she's fine. I don't care about her betrayal of Trump. She's not an American. Richard Hanania's feels very strategic.
Alex Kashuta
feels very strategic. But Scott Alexander was never pro-Trump. Not even a little, from anything I've ever seen. He wrote like multiple "you should vote for Kamala" essays. Yeah. And yet he's considered a Republican by like the online noosphere. And I think that this shows why a lot of people who are like him may eventually just be like, why am I even trying to like side with you guys, right?
No.
Like, why am I even trying to make you guys happy? If you didn't grow up in the previous generation and have this older interpretation of the right, you just be like, why am I fighting this when these guys are nice to me and accept me and you guys treat me terribly? Which again, I've mentioned this story before, but it's one that I think is always worth retelling because I think it's very important to the right. And I think it shows that the rightists who go to events and rag on like gay people at an event or something like that, or attempt to make people feel uncomfortable for having, different beliefs in them instead of just having honest debates. These individuals are not friends to the movement and they hurt us in the long run. The famous case here being one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, or the fifth, the Muslim lady, whatever her name is.
Omar,
yeah. So she goes to a psychologist and she's depressed, and the psychologist is like, well, I know this isn't your brand, but have you ever thought about praying? And so she tried and she has become a Christian. And a lot of people are like, but why didn't you become a Muslim, right? Like you used to be a Muslim, right? And she goes, well, of all the years where I was attacking people of faith, and many people on the left do feel this way, of all the years I was attacking the right, they kept coming at me with love and kindness. They kept coming at me with, I'm praying for you. I hope you get better. Like, I hope you, can see the light. And it was people on my own side, whether it was Muslims or other atheists, who would send me all the death threats and say, I hope you die, or I hope you.
Well, that's interesting that Muslims are doing that.
Well, of course, Muslims do that to apostates, right? Or people they would see as apostates. But it shows that this matters in terms of the final breakthrough with an individual. You want someone to come join your side, you don't treat them like a jerk, okay? Even if they are currently not within your team, I feel like leaving the door open and engaging in honest debate is how we bring them over. But
yeah, that is what cultural sovereignty is about. It's not about being opposed to outside ideas. It's about having a lot of different ideas and having debates and exchange between the two of them and learning from each other, and also switching when you find a better ideology.
Yeah, I think another thing, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do a whole episode on this, is, and I've really been confused about this, is why doesn't the left stigmatize and other the communists and the Marxists within their movement?
Well, how could you, when those ideologies feed into the logical conclusion of a culture that is built on victimhood? They are the victimhood political alignment.
I guess, but I mean, the right has done a very good job of keeping what I call like our trans extremists out of the movement, right? Like these are the racists and the anti-Semites and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the racists and the anti-Semites are more often than not associated with the Nazi Party, which was extremely socialist and progressive. I mean, like from the perspective, right? It was like, well, we're victims and we are going to, provide, social services and social support. I mean, okay, they did demonize this, like certain, like, a lot of different groups, but they still, in the end, that was still a very, by our modern standards, progressive leaning cultural ideology of victimhood and of let's have the government pay for everything.
Who do not realize that the Nazis was a progressive party and was a socialist party, because people often be like, oh, they're not actually, they were actually socialists.
National Socialists.
No, but people are like, oh, but the name doesn't necessarily mean that. So let's review their actual policies, okay? Because their policies were more socialist than Bernie Sanders or AOC.
Hello,
I'm just going to point this out. They were the perfect picture of socialism. The Nazis famously reduced unemployment through state-driven infrastructure projects, very famous to U.S. socialists. Like, who was the one during wartime that did the New Deal?
The big New Deal, or the.
It was like the New Deal Plus is what the Nazis implemented. They built the Autobahn highway construction, public building works, stadiums, monuments, etc. This is why there's so many Nazi monuments and buildings you can see, and rearmament and military expansion. By 1936, unemployment dropped from 6 million to under 1 million. So that's huge. State subsidized leisure. They organized state vacations, cruises, opera visits, and cheap cars. The precursor to the Volkswagen Beetle.
Wow.
And this was called Strength Through Joy, or Kraft de Freud. They had welfare and family support. They had generous maternity benefits and child allowances and marriage loans.
Fenestrate Simone for suggesting a Medal of Motherhood, which France did first before Germany ever did. But ask for unlimited maternal leave and ask for support.
No, but what's really funny is you ask an AI this and it'll be like, oh, but these policies were partially racially restricted. And I was like, they are with modern socialists as well. If
Yeah.
you look at the way welfare is handed out along racial lines. If you look
Even
at the
COVID
way
vaccines were often
even the COVID
prioritized.
vaccines were handed out partially along racial lines. If you look at the no, you just see this over and over and over again. There was like a UBI project in San Francisco only given to Black people.
Well, that was supposed to be reparations, but I mean, I guess kind of like the Nazis were like, well, reparations for the people who.
No, hold on. It's very important to note the Nazis believed that they were a discriminated group.
Yeah, again, right? It was victimhood culture. It's an inherently progressive associated thing. So I think it's not, there hasn't been any effort on behalf of conservatives to fight Nazism because it's not a conservative thing.
It's fundamentally what progressivism is, and I agree with that.
It's epitomized by an internal locus of control. We don't believe in victimhood. We believe in what we have control over, and we believe in granting ourselves the rights to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. Just give us the freedom to try to do that. Give us the chance. The American dream, the true American dream, is having a shot at it. And then it's been perverted by progressives to mean like, oh, the American dream is I should be given this all by default, which was never the American dream. That was never what brought immigrants over. Immigrants came over for a shot at these things, not from some socialist promise to be given these things.
I agree. Well, and you see the hatred of this from their hatred of Starship Troopers. We always point out they hate the idea of a system where
you have to earn it.
To have political power, you need to make a sacrifice, which is all you need to do. You don't need to join the military. You just need to make some sort of a sacrifice in terms of spending 2 years or a few years working for the government. So this is their core fear is having to make a sacrifice. They want to control other people. But why are these people allowed? Because if you look at somebody like Destiny, I love, one of my favorite things to do is watch progressives try to explain why progressives can't win elections anymore.
Okay.
In Destiny is, he's not a communist, right? Like he understands these more extremist positions aren't going to win, and that these individuals who hold these positions often protest progressives more instead of Republicans. That they often hate on. They're not actually trying to win elections. Was his core point in this video he did on this? And I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. And so my question to you is why do you keep these people within your community?
Right.
Why don't you make your community hostile to these people? And I think the part of the problem for the progressives is that the young, excited people are all part of these fringe movements. Whereas within conservative communities, it is the opposite. It's often, most, when I look at like the actual, I'm not talking about like the genetics people or something. I'm talking about like the actual racist. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these people are like older and out of touch. They're
the race supremacists. Yeah, because the human biodiversity people, I don't know, like more often than not, like their wives are different.
Yeah. Every human biodiversity person I know is in an interracial relationship. Like the idea that this is a racialist supremacist movement is effing ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now we are not human biodiversity people ourselves, but I'm just pointing out that movement does actually have a lot of like young engaged people within it. But I don't really consider it to be a particularly racist movement when I look at the actions of the people who are within it, which are pretty much all in interracial relationships and have interracial kids, which to me does not signal a belief that their race is superior to other races. It says that they're asking questions, and you can watch our videos on like, are certain races smarter than other races? They basically are like, I can understand how you could come to this idea, but you're probably wrong in ways that matter. But like, not to go into that now, the point I'm making is that on the right, those sorts of individuals, like the HBD bros, they generally hate the racist. Like they're not like friends with like your Richard Switzer or those sorts of individuals, right?
No.
And they are the first to yell them out of the room. The young MAGA rightists are the first to yell these people out of the room. Not yell them out of the room, and that was the thing also about like the way that this works. If you go to like our conference, at the first Perennialist conference, like Richard Spencer came, right? He felt uncomfortable and he didn't come to the second one, right? Like that's not like we were mean to him or anything, but it was clear that his sorts of ideas are not normal within this community. It wasn't
there's no place for them. He didn't have a place for them because it's not. They
It's not
don't have
relevant.
merit.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is not me saying there's a big difference between like somebody who's like, oh well, isn't Kevin Dolan a racist because he's like a Deseret nationalist, right? And I'm like, that's just like the Mormon version of being like a Zionist, right? Like he just wants a Mormon state, and I'm not gonna hate on somebody for preferencing people of their own cultural group, right? Like. And sometimes cultural groups have ethnic overlaps, but pretty rarely within the United States, for example. It's usually going to be like Mormons or Catholics or weird tech bros like us. And am I going to disproportionately, for example, hire a weird tech bro over a like a devout Mormon? Like I like Mormons, but yeah, unless it's for a sales position, in which case I'd probably hire a Mormon always.
100%.
But it makes sense to preference people who are culturally similar to you, and so it's important to differentiate like hateful racism and being like, oh, I culturally preference people who are similar to me. But the right has done that, and the left hasn't had these nuanced conversations, right?
Mm.
It hasn't been like, oh, you're like an actual racial supremacist. Like when you go out there and you say something like white people can't be racist, you should immediately, anyone in the movement should just be like, what are you doing? Like we need to have a conversation about you saying that, because that's a racist thing to say. That's like saying you can't be racist against Jews. Like, which is basically what the Nazis did, right? Like it's a huge problem when you can create a subjective judgment around which groups can be discriminated against and which groups can't.
Oh, yeah.
But you do this, right? So that's a big problem.
A little bit.
And I think that you're right. I think that part of the problem is that because they define the right as Nazis, they can't see where it's woven into their own culture.
Mhm.
Because they have this incredible amount of cultural control and an incredibly narrow degree of thought, as we see in this, chart of ideas on the left and the right, you don't get a lot of interesting conversation happening, so there's not as much reason to watch it. Because, it's so easy to commit thought crimes. If I even was a pure leftist and I tried to talk for 2 hours every day or an hour every day, like our podcast, we'd be defenestrated by now. We just said that we're because we would have made mistakes. That's why they keep their media short, tight, and incredibly editorially controlled. That's why leftism worked in the age of the newspaper, and it doesn't work in the age of the podcast.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, specifically the concept of the rightists being willing to support the Republicans and the leftists not being willing to support the Democrats. What do you think is that phenomenon? Because that's not one that we've never really gone deep on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we definitely saw that earlier. I think a lot of this has to do with just the very, very blatant betrayal that Democrats felt with the 2024 election and just being openly lied to multiple times. I mean, one, the very undemocratic selection of Kamala Harris for the presidential candidate after Biden was found
validating every single claim that DI is just racism.
But then also the clear gaslighting followed by the whiplash of, oh, actually, yeah, he's not fit to be president.
And we systemically covered this up.
Yeah, I just think that's what I see cited the most. And I think beyond that, there's the issue of Bernie Sanders being truly beloved, especially among the online content class, and then being systematically sidelined. And not just that, but admitting to being systematically sidelined.
Yeah.
So between those things, how can they not disassociate from the Democratic Party? They're extremely mad.
And by the way, I didn't finish all of the socialist thing the Nazis did, by the way. They also did price and rent control. They regulated prices, wages, and rents to prevent inflation. They did strict rationing and consumer repression. They also had universal employment. Everyone was expected to contribute to the people's community. Unemployment became a moral failing, not a structural issue. And those that didn't work were harassed or imprisoned, very similar to most communist and socialist systems.
Wow.
But broadly speaking, they were socialist by any modern standard. And very socialist. They were basically AOC. Like Nazis are AOC. The same broad political position, and they both hate the Jews. So don't worry. They've converged. But any final thoughts, Simone?
So let me just get this right. That we're conservative influencers have more reach online now because Democratic influencers can't associate with the Democratic Party anymore. That can't be it.
That's part of it, but it's that they are all forced into being so ideologically extreme that
Um,
they because it's all about conformity to this form of extremism, as we
mhm,
see from the chart,
mhm.
that they're not able to create interesting content. And when they're more
Okay. Oh, they
moderate,
got boring. You're basically saying like because any heterodox idea got kicked out, all that was left was boring conformity, which then
boring conformity or Hassan Piker. And then when you sorry, what was the point I was going to make?
on top
And
of that, like another reason why they
yeah,
lost.
that they oh yes, then the ones who were still producing more moderate content were essentially harassed into producing less and less of it and became more and more mentally ill over time.
You know,
As
I
we
do actually, you know what? That's a really underrated element of this because many of the progressive YouTubers that I follow who've had 5+ year careers on content platforms talk about really basic activities as things that are like difficult for them to complete.
two issues going on here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
One is, you have this was like ContraPoints or Philosophy Tuber, and like they basically stopped producing content because they were getting so harassed for trying
Mm,
to take nuanced perspectives.
mm.
Well, I mean, keep
You
in
think
mind,
it's harassment? Because when I see ContraPoints post, and ContraPoints is doing a decent number of, like Natalie Wynn does a decent number of interviews. Like I just saw another interview go live. ContraPoints or Natalie Wynn also was recently on A Bit Fruity, that podcast. So I'm seeing
it's
guest
not that they do nothing,
but what
but
I
you're not.
hear is that basically a lot of references not to videos not being produced due to controversy, but rather to it's just a lot of work. I think it's more has to do with mental health affecting the productivity of these people.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, like, can consider like Jenny Nicholson, who we mentioned before, like basically produces nothing anymore. If you look at the nostalgia chick, though, this was specifically harassment. Remember, she had a point that people didn't like, and so she got harassed. And now she basically doesn't produce things anymore. And she was a big progressive voice for a while,
Hmm.
which is that a lot of big progressives were essentially harassed out of YouTube by progressives, not conservatives, because there is such an expectation of ideological conformity.
Well, a lot of them also went on to platforms like Nebula, where they just felt safer.
Yeah. Well, and they're not producing content that people are engaging with as much, and so they've lost the wider cultural
Yeah,
conversation.
like I feel like Nebula was kind of an early, I not, and I don't mean this politically, but like an early form of Blue Sky, where they're like, oh yes, let's go to this new enlightened platform, but then no one's there, so they just are all kind of talking to each other in a very very small audience instead of the broader. Like YouTube is where the video discourse takes place. X is where this is what's happening right now. Discourse is taking place, and if you choose to be off those platforms, even if you're going to some enlightened walled garden, you're leaving the discourse.
Mhm.
So that makes sense. But no, I think it's underrated because I was telling you offline at one
Well,
point
we've
how
also talked about the self isolation of the Democrats, which has lost them a lot of access to platforms. Like Blue Sky is Democrats being trapped in a crystal by Trump.
exactly.
Like,
But I was telling you how Abby Cox, who is a YouTuber who I love, who just talks about fashion history, like it shouldn't be political, but I mean, the politics does shine through. Talked about how exhausting it is just to make like some Etsy listings, which that's a before breakfast activity
for
for
you.
yeah. So I think that it does come down also to people falling into progressive therapy culture, which like bricks them more and more and more.
It saps
Like
their
like
ability to
like a
produce
PC
content.
that needs to be defragmented, and they just like after a certain point, like their Tetris wall is a mess, and they can't break through anymore. Like it's gridlock.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I love that analogy of the Tetris wall just filling up over time as more and more progressive ideas and social therapy norms fall into their
Yeah,
lives.
as victimhood creeps, as the therapy takes over suddenly. Yeah.
But anyway, I love talking with you. For dinner tonight, please reheat those chow bao patties. And
Bancha.
what I'd love to try tonight is maybe could you like toast some bread with butter for like a bun because we've got white bread, right?
I
And
think we
then
also have hot dog buns. Would you like a hot dog bun instead?
white bread will taste better.
Like just white bread, just like buttered toasted white bread.
Yeah, and then cut up some onions and give me some salad with it. And
Okay.
I'll just put it in little like I'll make little sliders out of it.
Okay. How many slices of toasted buttered white bread?
2.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna eat a ton. Don't serve me more than 4 at a time. These things
Okay,
are
so 4
large.
patties, 2 slices of white bread, salad, cucumber, yes or no?
Yeah, cucumber.
Cucumber, salad.
And with the cucumber, you can make it either way this time, whatever's easier for you.
Okay, and I'm not making more of that sugar dressing, therefore, because
I don't need the sugar dressing for this
yeah,
because
you're
this
having
is
it with buttered toast. And then maybe I can make flaky butter biscuits or something like that tomorrow, which would be more.
I just figured this would be like a fun, different way to eat it.
Well, and the kids are really into sandwiches right now, so I can, it's useful. Everyone wins by this. So thanks.
Thank you. I love you so much,
Malcolm.
Simone.
You're so pretty.
Thank you for being my mated person, as they say in the
We're
romantic
bonded.
book that we learned.
Ugh.
Bonded for life. Oh no. Oh, it doesn't even make sense. Why would I like a woman for life if I'm not like supernaturally attracted to her?
Well, no, that's you don't have to feel personally responsible for it because it was fate
I have no
/
personal
pheromones.
responsibility. It was forced on me by God, clearly. So
It's not your fault. Yeah, for everyone who criticizes you for, clearly she's out of her league.
yeah,
It's
I
not his
was
fault.
bonded to her, don't you know? It's a romantic.
He didn't have a choice. Yeah, I love you.
I love you too.
You're perfect and hot.
No, you are. My bonded. You hit record? Okay.
Mhm.
So how's it going? You learn anything new today?
The reader suggested YouTube video of a Marxist analysis of what was that book called? Morningstar Milking Farm.
Okay, tell the audience about this because I can't believe you went through this analysis.
Well, I'm honestly glad a listener suggested it because it's hilarious. In the context of the episode that we ran on romantasy, there was this extremely smutty romantasy novel called Morningstar Milking Farm about a corporate facility where women bring minotaurs to ejaculation to create basically a Viagra pill for a pharmaceutical company. It's the minotaur semen extract that produces the desired effect.
Wait, is this written for women? It appears because
Yes, it is a romance novel written for women, and this one YouTube creator went to just do a satire of it, like read it and then roast it online. And then she reads it and she's like, actually, this is a Marxist critique of late stage capitalism. And she goes on this long rant about how like the facility represents late stage capitalism and this two-faced front room is all cutesy farm decorations and then you go back and it's all sterile hallways and how overeducated women can't find a job and end up having to sell their manual labor to produce products in the name of vanity. And it is, I highly recommend it. Just
the
search
review,
Morningstar
not the
Milking
book.
Farm Marxist late stage capitalism on YouTube and you'll find it. And it was very enlightening.
Enlightening, Simone.
It was great. I don't think I could read that book, so I'm glad that I just read her Marxist critique of it.
Well, I got obsessed with a series that I read the entire thing, by the way.
Oh, you did?
Oh yes. So when I was doing that episode, because we had talked about like Omegaverse in it,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, I should like Google around. Like I'm like, okay, I'll Google around. Are there any Omegaverse stories that a guy wouldn't hate, right?
So, for men, Omegaverse, but for men. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm looking for girl stuff because I don't want any guy in my romantic fantasies. I do not want a guy because they're not.
And that's why, actually, keep in mind that if you just, for example, Google image search the term Omegaverse, you're getting all boy covers that are anime.
So I found
a lot of women also prefer erotic material that don't have any women in it.
Because why do you want to? I mean, I'm not into men, right? Like, so why do I want to see men? But so I found one. Omega heroine wants her alpha villainous, and I read the entire. How many chapters was this? 141 chapters, basically 3 books in the past few days because I enjoyed it so much. It's just cutesy, basically.
How does it compare to Love Advice from the Great Duke of Hell? Because I just died for that.
I considered it about the same, but was a different vibe.
How does it
Um,
compare to the lesbian BDSM? What were those books called?
I liked it more than Sunstone.
Sunstone. Okay. So
So
better than Sunstone, equal to Love Advice from the Great Duke of Hell.
yeah, but different. This is okay. So this was about maximizing when we talk about a story meant to masturbate a specific emotional subset,
Okay.
sweetness, and people being really dedicated to each other as partners.
That's what the Sunstone series is about, no?
No, it is too tangential. The plot is not as interesting. So if you look at this story versus Sunstone, which is another good story that I'd recommend, but it's about BDSM if you're interested in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like a lot of it is like, oh, I did all this stuff to like prep for sex. I did all this stuff to prep for whatever and to prep to make my partner. This is like I helped them with a test.
Oh,
I
okay.
helped them get into medical school.
It's just straight to the act of love, of service, of help.
Right. And I should note, if you're getting into this and you expect something not safe for work, it even censors kissing. And that is the most not safe for work thing that
I wonder if so they must be catering to the laws of some country that doesn't permit showing lesbians kissing, which I'm thinking might be Russia, because the Duma last year, or no, previously, they only added to this legislation, had passed legislation, I think, that prevented any promotion in the media of gay or lesbian lifestyles. So I bet this is to enable distribution in Russia. But I don't know of Chinese regulation against gay or lesbian media, whereas in Russia, I know that is not permitted.
Interesting. So as a guy, I'm forced to watch men in my erotic material. I'm forced to read books with men in it. I don't want to do that. But no, it's you might like it, Simone, if you like
Maybe.
what was I going to say? Stories that are like it uses the Omegaverse trope just to make it so that there is no question. Like it makes their relationship not gay, because in an Omegaverse world, you have women with women and they can have kids.
And you have men with men. Men get pregnant in the Omegaverse
all the time. Yeah. So basically it removes all of the problems with them being lesbians in terms of like the story.
Oh, because one can get the other pregnant without there being.
Yes. And it creates with like scenting and marking and stuff like that, replacements for modern concepts, like giving someone a ring or something like that, which may have lost some of its power, or like, oh, well, we don't actually want to do like a real sex scene, so we'll just have her sniff the girl or something, right? Like,
okay.
I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I actually appreciate that more because I didn't want a sex scene. I just wanted them to be happy with each other, right? Which is, it's very interesting to see how it's done in practice, because I had never actually read an Omegaverse book before.
Wow.
So now I am the worst that I actually found one that I thought was pretty decent.
Yeah, see, okay, Simone's not the only one. Except that sounds actually good. Whereas
what she means is that Matt got mad at her for giving up that she actually reads all these pervy romantasy books.
I didn't.
And you said I only do it to go to sleep, and I'm like, you're on book number 3 of the series, Simone. You're not.
It takes me at least 30 minutes to fall asleep, and a book can help. At the end of that period, I'm more likely to fall asleep. I have to go through novel material every night. So even a 20-hour book isn't going to last me a lot of time. It's like saying like, oh, how dare you refill your prescription of Ambien?
Yeah, because your prescription is filled with porn, Simone. It's a prescription bottle full of porn. And you're the old man who's like, I need this for my heart.
Okay, all the readers say I'm busted, but whatever. If I'm...
You are so busted, Simone.
No, the problem is I'm still reading All Systems Red by Martha Wells and loving it. The problem is I'm not going to sleep. I'm not falling asleep. It has to be.
Well, you got to get back to your werewolf billionaire story, Simone. That's what's truly going to put you to sleep. All right. I'll get started here.
Hey, Octavian, how do you feel?
Let me get my weight right here, and I can move in my mouth.
You want to get milk in your mouth?
I'm gonna get away from the cold mouth and absurd farewell, get away, and medicine too.
You want cold milk and medicine?
Oh, that sounded a good plan. That sounded a good plan.
Okay. You got Mr. Bear here to cuddle with you?
Yeah.
Okay, buddy. So we'll give you milk and medicine. Do you want some mac and cheese?
No, I'm not feeling good.
Okay, so you just want milk and medicine, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, buddy. Is there anything else we can get for you?
Yeah.
What would you like?
Some milk.
Just milk and medicine?
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I'm gonna get that for you, okay?
And let's make it cold.
You feel cold? Or do you want cold milk because you're too hot?
I want cold milk.
Okay, I'll get you cold milk.
Oh, thank you, Mommy.
I love you, buddy.
I love you too, Mommy.